Okay, who's feeling happy? Yay! We are week 10. You are very nearly there. We are now on emotion, stress, and health. So emotions. Emotions are our biggest motivator for our behaviours. Emotions are essentially what makes us survive. They help us reproduce, they help us have babies. They also create social bonds and give us our morals. Our emotions let us know what is right and what is wrong. Now, strong emotions can cause you to do things you wouldn't normally do. I did that in anger. I was angry. I did something I wouldn't normally do. But also, our emotions let us avoid certain situations because we don't want to be there. Our anxiety, our worries, those emotions let us avoid going to certain parties, places that we don't want to be. Our emotions are really strong and they influence the way we behave. Now our stress, you all experience stress, and predominantly now we're getting to the end of the term, I'm sure your stress levels are going up. But how does that influence your health? And particularly, how does it influence your immune system? So today we're going to look at emotion, stress and health. Why do we have emotions and what causes us to have these feelings? So today we're going to run through some definitions of emotion, some theories of emotion. We're going to look at emotion and the mind, and then we're going to have a break. We're then going to look at stress, the general adaptation syndrome, current approaches. We're then going to have another break and we're going to look into coping strategies, coping resources that hopefully you might be able to utilise if you're feeling a little bit stressed at the end of this semester. So take a moment now. How are you feeling? Are you happy to be here? Are you really bored already? Are you confused? Okay? Emotions are complex feelings. They result in physical as well as psychological changes. And they influence our thoughts as well as our behaviours. Now, emotions. As we move through our day, we experience an awful lot of different emotions, don't we? We can be happy one minute, we can be sad the next, we can then be angry. These emotions, the experience, the variety of emotions throughout the day, we call them feelings. Okay, the emotions we feel throughout the day. Okay, settle down quickly when you come in, please. Thanks. So psychologists are interested in how emotions are experienced. Do we all feel happiness in the same way? Do we all feel anger in the same way? How are these processed within our brain and how are they expressed? Do we all express anger in the same way? Do we all experience happiness and smile in the same way. So these issues are really interested in the psychology research. And we look at the mental side of it, our cognition, our thinking. We're looking at our physiology, our behaviour as well. What are the end results of these emotions? So I'm going to run through just quickly the start of this video.
Did you know that astronauts in space have a hard time communicating without words because they're weightless and bodily fluids make their faces all puffy and hard to read? Have you heard that Botox can actually improve your mood, and not by smoothing wrinkles, but actually by easing depression? Or that this here gesture is common in the U.S., but is considered so rude in the Philippines that it could actually get you arrested? Yeah. All true. Emotions and the ways we express them are strange and powerful things. Emotions aren't just ephemeral psychological phenomena. They affect our bodies and our health. Because so many emotions have a certain contagious quality, our feelings and the behaviors they drive also affect our minds and bodies and health of those around us. This is true whether your emotions at the moment are of the feel-good variety or not. The powers of both positivity and negativity are stronger than you may know. Lots of studies have shown that people with a positive outlook on life tend to live longer, more fulfilling lives than their mean, grumpy neighbors. Fear, anger, and other more difficult emotions and how we handle them are pretty closely related to this thing called stress. And stress is so powerful that it can straight up kill you in any number of ways given the right opportunity. For better or worse, we spend a lot of our lives swirling around like leaves on the wings of competing emotions. Before we can hope to harness these feelings, we first have to understand them.
Okay, so before... Oh, that sound's going to drive you all crazy. Okay, so we need to understand emotions. So what is an emotion? Emotion is a state of arousal. And there are three primary areas that we are concerned with. These are our physiological changes, our cognitive processes, and our cultural influences. Now, the physiological changes, our face, our brain, and our body. When you're happy, we smile, and our face changes. When we're angry, we make silly faces. Okay? So our faces really show our emotions. Our brain is where the whole part of emotion starts, with that autonomic nervous system. Our brain kicks in the sympathetic nervous system, and we start that emotional response, that fight or flight. We're kicking in those hormones. And then our body responds. Our body responds. If we're scared, our heart rate might increase. We might start sweating. Okay? If we're excited, we'll have different body reactions. If we're sexually excited, our body responds in a different way. So the way in which we sort of feel emotions are all based on our face and our brain. And we'll come back to theories in a moment. There's also a cognitive side to emotions. How do we interpret an event? It's very specific to us. It's very subjective. We all experience situations in different ways, and the way in which we see that experience, that process, is very specific to ourselves. If I saw a dog, I quite like dogs, dogs don't bother me, so my face, my appraisal of the situation and my body would react very differently. If somebody saw a dog and they had fear because they had a phobia about it. So our appraisal of the situation really interprets that event, so leads to a different experience. And of course, there are cultural influences to to do with emotions. If we don't have a word for an emotion, how do we still feel that emotion? The Germans have 2 words for disgust, which we don't have, or I don't have in my English language. Does that mean I can still feel it? And you guys, do you have different words for different emotions? Can we feel them? Or is it unique to our own cultures? So, components of emotion. There are 3 components. This physical arousal, this psychological appraisal, and our subjective experience. And we need all 3 to get an emotional state. So our physical arousal will be our heart rate increasing, our sweat glands. It will be our pupils dilating, and our digestive system changing. How we are aroused by that particular situation. And that has to do with our psychological appraisal. It'll be very different physical arousal if I saw a dog and I loved that dog than if I saw that dog and I had a phobia for that dog. It's very subjective. It's very individual. And all these 3 components rely on our past experiences, on our environment. These all have an impact on our emotional state. So over time, several theories have been developed to understand emotion. We're going to run through 4 today. We're going to start with the James Lang theory, which suggests that emotions occur as a result of our physiological reactions to events. It was then proposed by Cannon Brad that our physical and our psychological experience of emotion happen at exactly the same time, independently, but happen at the same time. And then the Schachter-Singer theory, which is that the physiological arousal occurs first, and then the individual must identify the reason for that arousal. So using your cognitions, your appraisal of the situation, before it's labelled as an emotion. And then lastly, we're going to look at the facial feedback hypothesis, looking at our facial expressions and how they are connected to how we experience emotion. Do we smile because we're happy, or are we happy because we smile? Let's take the first one. This is the James Lang theory, and it suggests that our emotions arise from our physiological arousal. Our emotions are the result of our physical arousal. So we see a snake, we're scared. Okay, you have fear, our heart starts pounding, we start sweating. Our emotional result is fear. It is the result of those physiological changes. We could also think of it in the terms of crying. Okay, I feel sad because I'm crying. Okay, our emotions are the result of that arousal. But does this work for all emotions? Can we say that happiness has the same physiological arousal as, say, fear? Maybe, maybe not. It depends how you think about it. Cannon Brad said not. Cannon Brad decided that actually our physical arousal and our emotional experiences should happen at exactly the same time. They should be simultaneously presented, but independent. So we see that snake, we are fear, and at the same time as we go, I'm experiencing fear, my heart rate increases and I start sweating. But again, are these independent? Both these have to go through our thalamus, that sensory understanding, and the processes of emotion, which we'll talk about in a bit later. But are they independent? Are they really that different? Or are the edges a little bit blurred? Well, the Scatcher-Singer theory, this two-factor model, was then proposed. And this states that our emotions are composed of both factors, the physiological and the cognitive. So our knowledge, our understanding, our appraisal of that situation. So the snake elicits the sympathetic nervous system. We go, ah, and your brain goes, I'm scared, and then you get that emotional reaction, that fear. We're going to just look quickly at a roundup of these three.
Psychology and fasting. Difficult topics explained. Chapter and Singer's two-factor theory. How do you feel? To answer this question, it's important to realize that emotions include cognition, feeling, behavior, and arousal. How these elements of emotion relate to one another has been debated by a number of theorists over the years. The cognitive arousal, or two-factor theory, proposed by Stanley Schachter and Jerome Singer in 1962, states that two things happen when someone encounters a situation that elicits an emotional response. First, physiological arousal occurs within our sympathetic nervous system. Second, cognitive interpretation of the arousal occurs so that we can identify the emotion we're experiencing. Imagine seeing a car crash on your way to work. Obviously, such an event can be traumatic. How do we, as human beings, identify the emotion that such an unexpected event triggers within us? If we rush to help the car crash victim, we might find that our heart and breathing rates increase. These are physiological responses produced by our sympathetic nervous system. The degree of physiological arousal will determine the intensity of emotion that we experience. During cognitive interpretation, we assess the situation and determine what emotion is appropriate by consciously linking the arousal we're experiencing with what is happening around us. Even though we were not directly involved in the car crash, we might find ourselves experiencing fear and or sadness. Because we're all different people, situations or experiences are likely to affect us in very different ways. Appraisal refers to the cognitive act of assessing and evaluating the potential impact an event is likely to have on you. Primary appraisal is the initial step in appraisal where a person asks him or herself, is this a threat? If the answer is yes, she will experience physiological stress. Perhaps her stomach is knotting up. An emotional reaction, perhaps anxiety or fear. During secondary appraisal, she has to determine how to cope with the threat. Initially, she may be worried about the life of the victim, and this may cause increased stress due to anxiety. She might catastrophize that the injured party will die, and having noticed a baby seat in the back of the car, a child will be orphaned. Reappraisal of the situation may occur if new information is encountered. For instance, hearing from a paramedic that the car crash victim will survive may assist coping and bring stress down to a manageable level. Bypass Publishing presents
Okay, so there's a few theories there that identify the difference between our emotion, our arousal, and also our cognitions. Now, the last theory I'm going to present to you today is the facial feedback hypothesis. And this goes right back to Darwin's time. And he stated that our facial expressions have evolved as a way of communicating our intentions. And they relate to all cultures. So if you smile, it is across the world that we understand that you'll be happy. If we're fearful, if we make a really, I'm afraid face, everybody around the world, doesn't matter what culture you're in, can understand that face. Now, we've got 43 facial muscles in order for us to do a whole spectrum of emotions on our face. So this theory, what do you think? Does smiling make you happy, or does happiness make you smile? Well, the facial feedback hypothesis asserts that our expressions are actually capable of influencing your emotions. So if you smile, you will feel happy. If you frown, you're going to feel sad. And there's some brilliant research at the moment looking into Botox. And you know how Botox freezes your face so that you can't actually frown? Botox is thought to help with depression because you are smiling rather than frowning. So it's some really interesting research looking at this facial feedback hypothesis. So if we look at this as a process, we can see that the stimulus is not snake anymore, we've gone on to dogs. You see the dog, you're scared of dogs, your autonomic nervous system kicks in, your sympathetic nervous system gets that fight or flight, and your facial expression is scared. This then feeds back to your brain and your sympathetic nervous system, and then you interpret this emotion. You appraise the situation and your face, okay? And this can actually intensify this feeling or moderate this feeling. So a stimulus, like the snarling dog, causes the arousal and the facial expression. The facial expression then feeds back to our brain, our sympathetic nervous system, about what emotion we're feeling. And then we can intensify it or we can moderate it down. So I've put them all onto one sheet here so that you can see. The James Lang theory, emotion occurs after the body is aroused. That emotion is the response. The Cannon-Brad, arousal and emotion occur simultaneously and independently. The facial feedback, the changes in our face, allow us to feel emotions. So guys, when you leave here, keep smiling and you'll be happy. Smile through that midterm multiple choice test and you'll feel happier. And then the two-factor theory, arousal causes your brain to find a reason for that arousal. You're using your cognitions as well. And then you can label the emotion as it occurs. So very different models, but all based on those same components. Now we're going to move on now to emotions. We have primary emotions, but also we have secondary emotions. Now we're going to first look at primary emotions. And these are considered to be universal and biologically based. They are culturally wide, okay? Everyone in the world, universal, can understand anger, fear, happiness, sadness, disgust, surprise, and contempt on other people's faces. These are the 7 basic emotions. And each of these emotions has a corresponding facial expression to go with it. All other emotions we can call secondary emotions, and these are the combinations of the primary emotions. And there's some lovely research looking into blind people, and blind people still have the same facial expressions as people who have sight. So there's some wonderful research looking at those facial expressions. Now, one idea is why these are predisposed to us is that if we're afraid, our face widens. and our peripheral vision is slightly bigger. However, that doesn't really help us when we're looking at a happy face. We don't know why that is genetic. We don't know why that is predisposed. People are still looking into it. We're not sure the biological purpose behind some of our facial expressions. So primary emotions, they are our first emotion that we feel. These emotions are often masked by secondary emotions because it's the secondary ones that we feel the most. And we're going to talk about this next time we meet when we talk about disorders. So people who are depressed, people who have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and all other types of disorders, it is a combination of an awful lot of feelings. And that is why it's very difficult to sometimes understand what is at the root of a particular emotional problem. So Robert Plutchik, which is a wonderful name, believed that there weren't just primary emotions, there weren't just secondary emotions, but actually there were tertiary emotions too. And we can look here to see what I mean. So anger would be one of those first 7 primary emotions. And anger is made up of the secondary emotions: irritation, exasperation, rage, disgust, envy, and torment. So now you can see why we're getting quite complex. Then we can then think about these emotions as tertiary as well. And then we're getting into an awful lot of different feelings. So trying to find the root cause of somebody's anger can be really problematic. And we'll talk about that next time we meet. But how do we feel emotions? Where does it come from? We've talked a bit when we talked about the biology of the brain. We're going to go into a bit of detail about this today. Emotions are understood and processed within our brain. The first part is the limbic system. This is where our emotions are processed. All our sensory information, apart from smell, goes through our limbic system. Our smell goes straight to certain areas of the brain where it needs to, and that's because it's a survival instinct. From the cavemen, if something was off, we needed to smell it, so we didn't eat it, so we didn't die. But all our other senses go through this limbic system and process the feelings, the emotions that we have. They then go to our prefrontal cortex, which is to do with our higher ordered thinking. So let's take the limbic system. We're talking about our hypothalamus, our thalamus, and the amygdala. Now, the hypothalamus is the first thing that is kicked in, and this activates our autonomic nervous system and predominantly our sympathetic nervous system. Now, we've talked about this before, and you've done this before, so I'm not going to go into detail of it. But it's that fight or flight. Yeah, I need to run, and it sets it all in motion. Our thalamus serves as this sensory relay. All the information, apart from smell, goes through our thalamus and then is diverted to different areas of our brain for processing. Now it's the amygdala that is the centre role of processing our emotions. Okay, the amygdala. This part of the brain is really important. And there's some amazing research that's been done on the amygdala. We know that serial killers have smaller amygdalas. And amygdala predominantly is to do with our fear response. So serial killers have less of this fear response. They take more risky behaviours. And we know that if the amygdala is damaged, if this is a stroke or an accident, we know that people who have amygdala damage do more risk-taking behaviours. They have unprotected sex. They drive at an incredible speed. They don't think about the risks. These people are also prone to more mood disorders and more anxiety disorders as well. So our brain plays in the limbic system a real core in processing our emotions. Now, also we're talking about our prefrontal cortex. Now, you guys have an excuse because your cortex, your prefrontal cortex, deals with higher order thinking. And this is not developed until you are 25. So this is why it is thought that teenagers often take risky behaviours, because this part of the brain isn't quite developed yet. Yeah? It will develop in the next few years, so make the most of it. Do some risky stuff without consequences. And you've got an excuse to tell your parents, oh, it's because I haven't developed yet. Okay? So our prefrontal cortex is all about our rational thinking. Okay? Damage to this area results in a loss of joy. There's also, if you activate this area, you are more likely to have positive feelings. You're more likely to recover from negative feelings, and you can suppress negative emotions. So our left frontal cortex is really involved with our positive feelings, our area of joy. The right prefrontal cortex is the opposite. It's involved with our disgust and our impulse to withdraw and escape. So two very different, prominent areas of emotional understanding within our prefrontal cortex. So we know that there's certain areas in the brain, the nucleus and the prefrontal cortex. But we also know that our brain releases hormones when we have an emotional reaction to things. Predominantly, the two hormones are epinephrine and norepinephrine. Now, you guys, I'm presuming, know all about the hormones epinephrine and norepinephrine. But to do with emotion, they provide the energy of our emotion. Now, sometimes we feel overwhelmed by emotion, be that anger, be that anxiety. We can feel that flooding of emotion, and this is because of our hormones. They have that ability that means we're out of control due to our heart rate increasing, our blood pressure, okay? And these are things we can't consciously control. Emotions that flood us that we are not in control of. And the research suggests that different emotions differ from each other in the way in which we respond to them physiologically. So the way in which you'd experience fear physiologically is very different from the way in which you'd experience surprise or happiness. Our heart rate would be different, okay, and our temperature would be different. But universally, this is why we can say when we're hot and bothered, we can feel angry. You know, when we're angry, we all feel the same response. And that is because it's a physiological response. So it doesn't matter what culture you're from, we all have the same bodily responses. And when we're afraid, we can all feel that cold and clammy response. Now, this is wonderful research looking into mirror neurons. Our brains also help us understand other people's emotions. Monkey see action, monkey do action. This is how we identify other people's emotions, how we understand other people's intentions. And again, there's a lovely study here where they looked at 5,000 people over a 20-year period. And those individuals who were happy elicited a more happy network. They became happier themselves. Whereas those who were quite lonely and had lonely friends became more lonely over time. It was looking at this contagiousness of our emotions. Do we reflect our emotions in others? How many times have you gone out for a cup of coffee with a friend of yours and you finish that cup of coffee and you're happy and you're high because you've had a lovely interaction? But how many times have you gone for coffee with a friend who's quite sad, quite depressed, and you feel emotionally drained? It's like they've zapped everything out of you. We reflect emotions in each other. And we can look at these now. Mirror neurons. They're involved in our empathy, understanding how somebody feels. You know how you feel when you're happy, so you can see it in other people. If somebody else is crying, you know what that feels like. You've been through it before. You can understand their emotions. You can read what they are feeling. But it's also about imitation as well. Now, when you're feeding a baby, has anybody ever fed their nieces or nephews, has anybody got children themselves, and you go to put a spoonful of food in their mouth, and you automatically open your own mouth, don't you? You kind of go, every time you feed somebody, you go, yeah? Those mirror neurons, we reflect each other. If I was trying to do this, you probably wouldn't know what I was doing. But if I take the lid off my bottle, and if I take a sip, how many of you want to swallow? Yeah? You are mirroring my actions. And you know my intention because I am doing the action. But if I went like that, it would be a different intention and you would have to move. So because you are watching my body language, you know what my intentions are. And moods are contagious. You see somebody smile, you will smile. Okay, so when I smile, hopefully it will make you all smile too. Now this is a really interesting video, and I think it is incredibly important as nurses to understand how you can have rapport with people's emotions, how your gestures can affect somebody else. So I want you to watch this video. We imitate their behaviour, and this is amazing. Okay, so you guys as nurses, think about your behaviour. Think about the way in which patients will interact with you because of the way in which you behave, okay? And those mirror neurons. Now, we talked about attributions last week, didn't we? Attributing our behaviour. How do I understand how I behave, and how do we understand how others behave? And we looked at internal influences and also situational. And this also links with our emotions. If you think you did well in a test because of your efforts, it was an internal, you are proud and you're satisfied. If you think it's to do with your environment and your situation, you might feel different emotions. You might feel that you're grateful, surprised, or guilty. So the way in which we interpret events depends on our attributions, internal or external. But it also can depend on our expectations. Now there's some lovely research looking at Olympic Games winners. And our expectation is to win, especially for the Olympics. They really wanted to win. So a silver medal was like failure. Yeah? Their emotion wasn't great. They weren't happy that they got silver. But the expectation of getting a medal, getting a bronze and beating everybody else was actually brilliant because they were comparing themselves to people who hadn't won medals. So our beliefs, our perceptions of the situation, our expectations and our attributions influence our emotions. But also, we have to have a sense of self. We have to understand who we are, our ability to perceive if you've done well or if you haven't done well. Shame and guilt, for example, don't actually incur in children until you're 2 or 3 years old. Okay? So think about the way in which you're responding to children, think about your emotions and what you expect of other people. They have to understand themselves to be able to understand their emotions. Now what do you think of this? Do you think this is an absolute overgeneralisation? Bit of a stereotype. Men's Day, Women's Day. What do you reckon? Well, I'm sorry to say, actually, chaps, but there is some truth behind this. Women can show great emotion throughout their day. They experience emotion far more intensely than men. They display emotions far more frequently. They're more comfortable expressing their emotions, and they are better at reading emotions. Now, this is a general, okay, it is a generalisation, but you get the idea, okay? There are some differences. And some studies have shown this, that men's emotion is inconsistent with the male image. Maybe not for you guys, because you know about emotion and you learn about emotion. But for other individuals, they may show greater discrepancies between men and women. Now, you all know about IQ, intelligence quotient, and levels of IQ. But what about EQ? Mastering your emotions. It's a really important life skill to understand your emotions. Because when you can do this, you can recognise emotions, not only in yourself, but you can recognise emotions in others. You can understand the physiological changes. What triggers that emotion? If you've got an anger management problem, what triggers that anger? What is the antecedent to that behaviour? What makes you depressed? What makes you happy? And then the regulation of emotion. Don't shut it down. Work it through and talk about mindfulness. Well, we'll come on to this when we talk about coping strategies and coping resources at the end. Now, my background is working with children who have autism, and I work a lot with children who have profound intellectual disabilities. Okay, guys, listen up, I'm nearly finished on this little section, okay? So just listen for 2 more minutes. So children who have autism, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder that is characterised by repetitive behaviours, communication problems, but also social problems. They have difficulty recognising emotional states in others, an inability to understand this non-verbal expression of emotion. They have difficulty understanding tone of voice. Okay, and this all impacts the way in which they themselves behave socially. So you as nurses need to understand that emotion and the way in which we interact plays a major role in the way in which we behave. Now this is this is the end of the video, I'm not going to play it, but his definitions on these crash courses are really useful when you're doing it. Okay. Stress. This section of the lecture is only about half an hour, okay? So listen up, maybe even 20 minutes, and then you'll get another break. So you all experience stress, and towards the end of the term, I'm sure you're feeling an awful lot more stress because of all your assignments that you have to do before the end of term and all the tests that you have. Psychologists define stress as the process by which we perceive and respond to certain events that we call stressors that we view as challenging or threatening.
And stress is the process by which we perceive and respond to certain events, or stressors that we view as challenging or threatening. In other words, stress isn't technically an emotion. It's more of a reaction to a disturbing or disruptive stimulus. And our reactions stem in part from our appraisal of that stimulus. A person can either roll with or get worked up about a missed flight, an increased workload, or a strange thump in the house. These external stressors typically fall into three main categories: catastrophes, or unpredictable large-scale events like war, natural disasters, and terrorist attacks; significant life changes, things like moving, having a child, losing a job, or the death of a loved one; and then just everyday inconveniences like getting caught in traffic, running late, or feuding with your roommates. Any of these stressful events, big or small, even the good things, can fire up your sympathetic nervous system and trigger that old fight or flight response. In this way, it's important to understand that stress is ultimately natural. You experience it for a reason, and a bit of short-lived stress can actually be a good thing. It can make you active and alert when you need to be. Like an upcoming chemistry test might be stressing you out, but that might help you find focus so you can dominate that day. And in your body, moderate stress can kick the immune system into action to do things like heal wounds and fight infections. It does this by triggering the release of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. These chemical messengers are what get your organ systems to respond the way you need them to when you're getting charged by a bear, focusing really hard on the gas law for your chemistry test. But they're also why chronic stress can really wreck a body and mind. Research has shown that abused children have a high risk of chronic disease, and people suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which we'll talk about in an upcoming episode, experience higher rates of digestive, respiratory, circulatory, and infectious diseases. A lot of these negative connections between your body's systems have to do with the fact that many of its most basic functions, like blood pressure, breathing, body temperature, digestion, and heartbeat, are in part regulated by the autonomic nervous system. We've talked before about how the sympathetic side of that system cranks you up and the parasympathetic arm calms you down, but both those systems also interact with the so-called brain and the gut, the enteric nervous system, which helps regulate gastrointestinal function. And it's this brain-gut connection that explains how stress causes digestive problems. Because when that werewolf pops out of the bushes and a wave of cortisol washes through you, your body wants to focus its energy on sending blood to your muscles so that you can react quickly, which is good, right? So maybe that's partly by shutting down digestion or decreasing the amount of digestive secretions and making your colon spasm. An anxious mind can lead to an anxious gut. Stress is an even bigger risk factor in North America's leading cause of death, heart disease, because it contributes to increased blood pressure, heart rate, and cholesterol levels in a number of different ways. Essentially, when your stressed out nervous system is redirecting all of its energy sources to your muscles and brain, it pulls flow away from your other organs. And one of those organs is the liver, whose job includes removing the fat and cholesterol from your blood. So basically, when a stressed liver can't filter properly, that extra fat and cholesterol ends up circulating in your blood, which can settle around the heart. So believe me, one study monitored the blood cholesterol and clotting speed of 40 male tax accountants throughout the year, and it found that their cholesterol and clotting rates, and thus risk of heart attacks, increased dramatically during the weeks before tax day as they stressed out about finishing their work. And physiologically speaking, it's worth pointing out that some close relatives to stress, when it comes to their effects on the body, are pessimism and depression, which also have been linked to stress and heart disease. Many types of studies have found that people characterized by their optimism, happiness, love, and positive feelings often live significantly longer than their grumpy, down counterparts. Researchers don't quite know exactly how chronic negative emotional states influence health, but it may be some combination of lifestyle or behavioral factors, like neglecting your health or not taking your heart meds, feeling blue, or social factors like the way that depression can be isolating and thus prevent others from helping you out, or biological factors like increases in certain kinds of inflammatory proteins released by the immune system in response to stress and sadness. So in the end, while stress may not directly cause disease, you could say that the two walk hand in hand. In that way, it isn't a stretch to say that chronic stress can kill. So go ahead, take a deep breath, feel your emotions, appreciate them, but don't let them run your life. Today,
Okay, feel your emotions, but don't let them run your life. So stress. If you don't keep talking, you're going to elevate my stress levels. Quiet down. Okay, stresses are demands placed on your body that require adjustment to bring about that reaction. We are talking about physiological responses, and there are three. Now, we've talked about the autonomic nervous system. You guys have done it before. I'm not going to do it again, okay? I presume you know what the autonomic nervous system is and the part of the sympathetic nervous system. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the general adaptation syndrome, and then we're going to look at the cognitive appraisal model within that and the mediating effects. So the general adaptation syndrome, you have a stressor. Let's say you've got your upcoming end of term quiz. This places a demand on you, okay? It brings about a stress reaction. The equilibrium in your body has been upset. There are 3 stages. The first one is alarm. The second one is resistance. And the third one is exhaustion. So there's a series of these physiological reactions to stress. The alarm phase, the resistance phase, and the exhaustion. And depending on what happens, we either adapt and our equilibrium comes back, or we fall ill. Okay, 2 outcomes. So the alarm phase is when that sympathetic nervous system kicks in, that flight or fight response. We have a boost in energy. We see that tiger. Okay, that's a bit of a general exaggeration, but you have your test coming up. That is your stressor. Your blood flow increases, your heartbeat speeds up, digestion slows, and your muscles tense. This is the first part of the GAS. The second part is the resistance phase. Your body attempts to cope with the stressor. And generally, it will. Generally, your body does adapt to stresses and returns to normal. But sometimes when we're really stressed, it doesn't cope particularly well. These prolonged periods of stress. So short-term physiological responses to stress can be adaptive, they can be useful, they can make you revise, they can make you go and do things which are a good form of stress. However, in response, and if it lasts too long, it will cause you an illness. And also if you're stressed, you're more vulnerable to other stresses. You know what it's like when you've had a really hard day, you're feeling really stressed, your tolerance level of other people goes down. So think about this with your patients. They are going to be stressed if they've just been told some bad news. Their tolerance level of other environmental factors that is happening around them is going to be less. And if they don't find a coping mechanism, this will lead to more stress, more illness, and can cause death. So we know that in the exhaustion phase, our body is just depleted of all its natural resources, and we are far more vulnerable. We've all had tension headaches because of stress, and got that neck pain because of stress. But if it's chronic, and it continues for a long time, it can increase our blood pressure and cause heart attack and strokes. This is the curve, this is what it looks like. The line in the middle should be your normal level of resistance. A stressor kicks in here. And your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. Your resistance is good, and most of the time you will deal with that stress with your normal resistance. But sometimes you go into this exhaustion phase, and this is when all your natural resources have been depleted. This is probably not new to you, but the hypothalamus kicks in your sympathetic nervous system, it secretes CRH, which kicks in your pituitary glands, that sends ACTH through your blood to your adrenal glands, and that produces the stress hormone cortisol. And again, this continues in a circular motion. And we can call this the HPA. So I'm not going to go through this because I'm sure you know it. Your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your adrenals. But what is interesting is the research that goes with this. a lower socioeconomic status group, you have higher mortality rates with almost every disease and other medical conditions on top of that. Low social economic stress. You have to live with continuous environmental stresses, and these are higher rates in crime, for example, more discrimination, fewer community services, your housing isn't as good, you're exposed to more hazards. All of this creates stress, and this is why it matters with your social economic status, particularly with children. Children are really vulnerable to the stresses associated with poverty. Okay, how many of you have heard of this psychoneuroimmunology? Have you been through this before? Have you heard of it? You haven't heard of it? Okay. So these look into the interplay between your brain, your nervous system, and your immune system, how they impact on each other, how they are associated. And this identifies that stress leads to illness. Chronic inflammation can lead to cardiovascular problems and cancer. You should all know that. But what is really fascinating is that mindfulness, yoga, can help your immune system, can reduce that stress and make you less prone to other diseases. It works the other way round. Changes in your immune system and your endocrine system create changes in your nervous system, which lead to changes in your emotions. Now, I did have a video to show you here. Now, this is quite a long video. I appreciate it is not the most exciting, but actually it is really interesting talking about the interplay between illness, inflammation, stress, and our immune system.
The President Center is very interested in understanding the interaction between the brain, body, and immune system, and the science behind it, and generating rigorous scientific evidence about the efficacy of the approach.
I think this center is one of the few places, if not the only place, where we're really looking at this interface between neural and immune processes, but doing that in clinical context.
It's an interdisciplinary center, really before the notion of the kind of patchwork of interdisciplinary became sort of used. And this particular center has brought together leading scientists to ask how the brain and body interact to impact the immune system. And more importantly, what are the impacts of these interactions on
This is really interesting, you know, you really should be listening to this, guys.
And secondly, we've really taken groundbreaking steps to understand what we can do about it.
The way our research informs the mind-body link is really to map out the molecular mechanisms, the specific biological gears and pulleys that allow our experience of everyday life to change the way disease unfolds in our body. Part of the reason it's important to do this kind of work is it helps us understand what's going on in the black box of epidemiology, how differences in life circumstances can turn into differences in disease, and why that actually makes sense given our evolutionary heritage.
My research focuses on mind-body interactions, and we study those primarily in the context of cancer. So most of our work is trying to understand things like what are the pathways through which stress can get inside the body and potentially impact things like tumor development and progression. We also are very interested in trying to understand how changes in the immune system can influence the brain and behavior, leading to symptoms like fatigue, cognitive problems that plague cancer patients and survivors.
One of the things that I've been studying for the past several years is how our brain processes basic social emotional experiences. A lot of work has shown that there's this relationship between inflammation and depression, but all of this work has been primarily correlational. And so one of the things that we're doing in our research is we're actually looking at this experimentally. so that we can tell whether the inflammation is causally increasing depressive symptoms.
We've been very interested in how stress impacts health outcomes, and one of the most striking areas of research has been how stress leads to infectious disease. And we've been really at the forefront showing that major depressive disorder and sleep problems lead to changes in the immune system that are critical for protection against infectious disease.
I had insomnia so very badly that I was not sleeping at all that night. I found myself awake the entire night.
What we've shown here at the center is that depression, that sleep problems, that social isolation all lead to increases in inflammation, that increases the risk of these chronic diseases.
I wanted some type of relief, which wasn't medication.
The center's really developed very novel and innovative interventions that have targeted specific behaviors and targeted these inflammatory pathways to reduce that inflammatory disease risk. We've conducted over 7 different trials of Tai Chi, all funded by the National Institutes of Health, evaluated immune function, depression, fatigue, sleep problems in older adults and middle-aged adults, in rheumatoid arthritis patients and cancer survivors.
After just a couple of sessions of the Tai Chi, I noticed that I started to sleep at night.
We found that the Tai Chi is very effective. We see a significant decrease in inflammatory responses when we measure them in lipoproteins that are circulating in our blood, inflammatory responses when we measure them at the level of a single cell, and there's a decrease in inflammatory gene expression. Separate studies have also been carried out in yoga to produce a very similar reduction in inflammatory signals of Tai Chi, yoga, and mindful awareness practices. The mindful awareness practices that we have promoted and really now begin to study in the Mindful Awareness Research Center is a practice that is as effective in many ways for the treatment of depression, insomnia, and targeting inflammation as the Tai Chi.
A lot of these skills that we're learning are really life skills. It's like this master toolbox that can help you deal with life as it is.
So the next major step is to disseminate this information.
The research and the education go hand in hand. Because what happens is the research shows positive results for meditation and mindfulness, and that encourages and inspires people. So the research really helps disseminate the message of education.
One of the things that we're beginning to do is to move what we know into the primary care setting and export it into the global community. Over 120,000 people are taking our online courses. Our research is really pointing the direction for the use of these interventions to prevent disease and drugs and disease.
I'm so happy that I did participate in this particular research. It really absolutely does work.
Okay, so the idea that Tai Chi, yoga, mindfulness can really help with our immune system and the way in which we process diseases within our body. Does our outlook to life really matter to where the effect of diseases has on our body? So this is a fascinating area, this psycho-neuroimmunology. And it all comes down to how we perceive a situation. Looking at these glasses, do you see them as half full or half empty? Are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? Because optimism and pessimism really affect well-being. They affect your the way in which you can actually overcome different types of challenges and diseases. Optimism is far better for your health and well-being than pessimism. Optimism, they take better care of themselves because you find ways to solve problems. You get support from others. You seek information. And when we go on to coping strategies, we will see how this is linked to better outcomes. Pessimists often do self-destructive things. So optimism may not really help in extending longevity if you've got lung cancer, but it's good for your health when you don't have those life-threatening illnesses. It helps you face problems, it helps you face challenges rather than avoiding them. So the way in which you see things really impacts your health. Now, we can look at this as control over situations, and we can call this locus of control. And it can be internal, and it can be external. Internal locus of control is we are responsible for what is happening. External locus of control, you believe your lives are controlled by luck, fate, and also by other people. When you feel in control, this affects your immune system. And it may be why people recover better from diseases, from colds, from surgery, because we have a control of our situation. Research suggests that internal locus of control is associated with good health, even academic achievement, and emotional well-being. So how we perceive our situation. Our feelings of control can eliminate the relationship between stress and health. And that is a major thing to think about, isn't it? The way in which we see things. If we are in control of our circumstances, can help us eliminate different types of diseases and speed up recovery from different types of surgery. So we've done some really interesting research in a group of patients who recovered from heart attacks, those who believed that the heart attack occurred because they smoked, because they didn't exercise, or because they had stressful jobs, were more likely to change their bad habits and recover quickly. In contrast, those that thought their illness was due to bad luck or fate were far less likely to recover. They weren't going to generate those plans, and they continued to resume their old unhealthy habits. So really it comes down to our personalities, type A and type B. How does that influence your stress? What type of personality do you have? Do you climb the mountain because it's there? Or do you sit and lean up against it because it's there? This has a major impact on our response to stress. And there's some incredibly interesting research that suggests that yes, type A personalities do have a different response to heart disease as a risk factor. Men who were angry and hostile, 25 years later, had a higher chance of having a coronary heart disease. Okay, so it really does impact your physical health. Your emotions, your stress relates to your physiology. We can see that clinical depression is linked to at least a double risk of later heart attacks and cardiovascular disease. If you were listening to that video, because there's so much cortisol in your body, it can relate to the fat accumulation around your internal organs, and this can have really detrimental effects on your body. And cancer can cause depression in patients. You get your diagnosis. Your tumour produces high levels of chemicals, and these can cause emotional and behavioural symptoms of depression. Whereas positive emotions, happiness, can be a protective factor of health. And there's a lovely study that looks into nuns. If you are positive, if you are happy, you believe in love and hope and gratitude and amusement, you will live longer. Okay? So be happy when you leave here today. I want everyone to be smiling and you will feel happy. Okay, that is stress. We're going to take a 3-minute break and we're going to go on to coping skills. And then you've only got about half an hour left. Okay. These are these stable characteristics. They are our personality characteristics. They are our predisposition. But they're also our environment. And these help us in adapting to stress. Okay, our personality characteristics and the environment around us help us adapt to stress. And these are what we call coping resources. So we're going to talk about 4 different factors that mediate the impact of stress. The first one is social support. Those of us who have friends, companions, are much more likely to deal with stress better than those that don't have social support. And this increases our immune functioning, believe it or not. Also, those of you who are optimists, rather than pessimists, you have more adaptive coping skills. You believe it's okay. You have confidence about the future and the success of what is going to happen to you. So 2 of the main factors are social support and optimism in coping. So friends can help. People who have a network of close connections, those really interesting, supportive friends, live longer than those who don't. And there was a lovely study that was done looking at partner support when women, were put into MRI scanners. Now, they didn't lie in the MRI scanners, they didn't tell us what to highlight. They were in an actual MRI scanner. And these women were given electric shocks. I told you psychologists love to do weird, wonderful experiments. Those who went into the MRI scanner alone were really highly stressed. Those who held a stranger's hand had slightly reduced stress. Those who held their husband's hands had even more reduced stress. And those that were super couples, those who had more intimate relationships with their partners, had far better responses to stress than other individuals. So think of that in your nursing career. How can you help patients be less stressed? Give support to vulnerable individuals, and it can really help in their emotions and how they deal with that situation. But there are cultural differences to social support. For me, I will go and ask my friends for support and not think anything of it. But for you guys, predominantly I think most of you are Asians, you need to ask for help occasionally. Don't lose face, okay? There is studies out there that says, as general, you have more stress hormones because you don't ask for help, okay? So you need to learn that actually asking for help is good because it helps with your social support, it makes you live longer, and reduces your stress. Now, the 2 other important moderating impacts of stress are conscientiousness. Those who foster better health habits are better at coping with stress. And by this we mean those that don't participate in risky behaviours, so they don't have unprotected sex, those who have better eating habits, those who don't get involved with alcohol abuse or violence, okay? Those individuals who are conscientious, okay, have a better moderating factor for the impact of stress. And then something that you should know about is autonomic reactivity. Our body likes equilibrium. Our body likes it to be in a nice, oh, come on, guys, you've only got 20 minutes left. Don't make my stress levels go up. Listen, thank you. Okay, this autonomic reactivity response. Our bodies like equilibrium, don't they? They like it all to be on par. Our heart rate, our digestion, our respiratory rate, our pupil response, even our sexual arousal. If it's at a nice equilibrium, we respond to stress in a better way. So we need this reactivity to be low so it doesn't affect our stress. But our level of stress depends on, as we saw in those models right at the beginning, our appraisal of the situation. Our thoughts about the situation, our feelings, our emotions, our behaviours, all depend on how we interpret that situation. Do you have a phobia to that dog or not? That interpretation of an event is going to affect how we see that situation and whether we perceive it as a stress. Do those demands exceed the resources? And this will depend on our personality characteristics, our culture, our gender, our race, our social economic status, and even our marital status, all influence how we experience those stressful situations, that cognitive appraisal. And Folkman and Lazarus suggested that people who were depressed, they were more vulnerable to threat and hostility because they perceived the situation as more severe than other people would have done. Okay, so depression can really change the way in which you perceive a situation, and you can perceive it to be more stressful. So we can see here in this wonderful coping process called the transactional model of stress and coping, how we appraise that situation, that primary appraisal. Is it a threat or is it not a threat? If we don't think it's a threat, life is good. Life is not stressful. But if we perceive it as a threat, we get stressed. And we need to find a coping strategy. And these coping strategies can be maladaptive or they can be adaptive. And by this we mean they can be beneficial or they can be detrimental. And they came up with this idea that the model of stress and coping has this mediational process. Stress is related to adjustment. And there are three factors to do with this. Our appraisal of the situation. Is this stressful to me or not? Our coping strategies that we'll talk about in a minute. And our resources. Do we have strong friends? Do we have a good group, a social group of people around us? Do we have those resources to fall back on? And all these three will mediate whether we adjust well to the stress or not. And we can bring this all together. Is this a threatening situation? Do I perceive it myself as a threat? Is it a challenge to me? Can I control it or not? If I can't control it, and it's threatening, and I'm challenged by that, my stress is going to go up, okay? So strategies to coping. This is the last few slides we're going to go through. Strategies are conscious efforts. We are aware of what strategies we are doing to reduce and manage that stress. And we do this through using external resources. And they maintain psychological homeostasis. We as human beings like everything to be on one level. We don't like that cognitive dissonance. We like to change things in order for us to maintain that homeostasis. And this is how we use cognitive strategies. Now, if a situation is deemed controllable, we use very different strategies than if it is uncontrollable. So if a situation is controllable, and this will depend on yourself, your interpretation of an event, and your patience will determine what is controllable and uncontrollable to them. Some people will get a diagnosis and be okay with that and they can control it, others won't. And they need coping resources depending on how they perceive that situation. All of us perceive that situation differently. If we are doing problem-focused coping and we can control the situation, and you've been told, I don't know, you've got a diagnosis with cancer, you can go out and seek information about it. You can make some decisions on how you want to proceed with your treatment. You can request help, you can ask for information, and you can do focused activities, and this will all help you deal with the problem. Otherwise, you can deny the diagnosis, you can bury your head and not think about it. And this is your maladaptive way, the passive way. It's not good. If you feel that the situation is out of your control, you might like to use emotional focus. You know you've got an end of term quiz coming up. You have to take that quiz. But how do you deal with the emotion, stress? Well, you can go for a run. You can have a massage. You can use expressive psychotherapies. You can do art therapy. All of which will help you cope with the stresses of your upcoming exam that you feel is out of your control. Or you can be maladaptive, and the stress of the exam is too much. You can all go out, you can drink alcohol, you can eat junk food, you can smoke, as your way of dealing with the situation. So the way in which you perceive the situation will make you deal and cope with the strategies in a different way. So if we look at problem-focused coping, it alters the source of the stress. You want to see what is the antecedent of that behaviour. The problem-solving and seeking of social support really helps if you can modify or eliminate that source of stress in the first place. Okay? You can eliminate the source of stress by actually doing some revision for your end-of-term quiz. That eliminates the stress and you feel happier about it. Or it's about collecting information about the disease, about the disorder. So you're being more focused, you're actually focusing on the problem in hand. Whereas emotional focus is about reducing your reaction to the event. And this can be positive. You can go and pray if you're religious. You can use humour. You can go for a run. The way in which we see the situation helps with what type of coping strategies we use. So which one's better? Is it better to be in control, or is it better to just let go? Which one works best? Well, when we're looking at reducing stress and anxiety, it's better to use problem-focused strategies when you're in control of the situation. When you are in control, you can go and find information about your disorder. You can go and do some work and reduce the stress of your end-of-term tests. If you are in an uncontrollable situation, you perceive that you can't control it, you can use emotional focused coping. Emotional focused coping is better when you are not in control of your situation. But what is important, and what's important for your patients as well, is that coping strategies need to change. Each and every one of you will have a different coping strategy, and you need to be flexible in different situations with what works. And for the past sort of 20 years, we've been looking at this coping flexibility, the ability to change the way in which you use your resources depending on the problem at hand. If it's not working, you need to change your strategy. So flexible coping will produce more desirable outcomes when you have exhausted that particular resource and it's not working for you anymore. So you can seek problem-focused coping with controllable circumstances and use emotional-focused coping when you perceive it as an uncontrollable situation. And it's all about the goodness of fit. Make sure that that strategy that you're using, the strategies that your patients use, are matched with that situation. So for good coping to take place, you need the situation to be perceived as controllable, and you can use problem-focused strategies. If it's uncontrollable, you can use emotional-focused. And this is really well researched. So if you're looking at chronic illness and you've got a patient who's been diagnosed with MS or HIV or cancer, you need to know whether they are perceiving that as a threat or if they believe it to be out of their control. And you can help them deal with the situation when you understand what type of situation they're in and what is appropriate for them to use as a coping mechanism. Is it appropriate for them to go and do a run, or do they need more information about the disease, the disorder, in order for them to process the information and understand it?